topic that I know has been taught so many times in the church today, that it has actually created in the minds of believers an idea that at any moment God could decide to make your life a living hell. Now, how many of you can honestly say you can trust somebody completely and wholeheartedly that could make your life a living hell at any moment? Can you trust someone like that? Could you call someone like that your father? But yet, we have all been taught to believe that God can, whenever He wants to, at random, at any point, unleash all hell on us. Okay? And so, to the degree that people, when they go through this hell, will say, I am going through a Job experience. Now, for those of you who have done this, I love you enough to tell you the truth. You are not a disciple of Job. You're a disciple of Jesus. You're not meant to identify with Job. You're meant to identify with Jesus. You're not meant to be like Job. You're meant to be like Jesus. Job is not your example. Jesus is. Are there things you can learn from Job? Yes. But if they do not line up with Jesus, then you reject them. You understand? Jesus is your blueprint. Jesus is your pattern. Does this make sense to you? Right. Now, we do not know which covenant Job was in with God, or whether he had a covenant at all with God. We do know, as far as we can tell, that the people of Job's day did not know that there was such a thing as a devil. So when they spoke, anything that happened, they automatically attributed to God. Now, I told you when we first started that much of what the Bible says is accurately recorded, but it isn't necessarily accurately stated. Does it make sense? So if someone was doing minutes here, and I said the sky is pink, they would record the sky is pink. But does that mean the sky is pink? No, the sky is blue, isn't it? So just because they recorded that I said the sky is pink, that doesn't make the sky pink. So someone can accurately record what I say, but it not be an accurate truth of reality. Does it make sense? The Bible is accurate to the T. It will tell you all the failures and all the successes. And it expects you to know that the failures are not where you should follow, but the successes are where you should follow. Amen? We do not follow those great men of God who are in the hall of faith in their mistakes. We follow them in their faith. Isn't that right? So what we're going to do is, and I'm going to encourage you to do this. The Old Testament is really awesome, but it only really benefits you if you look at it through the New. So when you read the New Testament, you'll find Paul quotes the Old very often. Take the New Testament, read everywhere where Paul quotes the Old, go and read the Old through the lens of the New, and you will get a perspective that is the same as which Paul and Peter and James had about the Old. And these were first century Jews who knew very well about the law, who knew very well about all the different festivals and practices, so they had the best opinion and the best contextual opinion on the subject than anybody else could. How many of you know that the word cool has changed into something completely different to what it was 100 years ago? Well, the word generation has also changed its meaning from when Elizabeth English first came out to now. And there are many such words that have changed. For example, there are some words that now mean exactly the opposite to what they used to mean. So language changes over time. And if language changes over time, then it stands to reason that you want to hear what something meant from the people who were closest to the time, rather than from people who were hundreds or even thousands of years later. Are you with me? I have a boss who is a Jew. And when I asked him about the Day of Atonement, which is Yom Kippur, he told me that they don't sacrifice animals anymore because it's barbaric. No, they don't sacrifice animals anymore because this sacrifice has been made. It's got nothing to do with being barbaric. Does it make sense? Now they've made an excuse so they can keep going on with their religious practices. But the reality is, Jesus made a sacrifice once and for all time. And the Bible says that the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin. But Jesus was always going to be that sacrifice. And I'll prove it to you. He was always going to be the sacrifice. From the foundations of the earth, the Lamb was slain. That means before the earth was even created, God knew that Jesus would have to give his life for our redemption so that we could be brought back into the kingdom. Amen? God made the decision to make Adam and Eve knowing what would happen and knowing what he would have to pay in order to get us back. And he still did it. That means something. Right? Okay, so go with me quickly, please, to the book of James. You might be thinking, whoa, what are we doing in James? Alright? James chapter 5, we're going to read from verse 17. I think. Yeah. Elijah was a man with a nature like yours, and he prayed fervently that it might not rain for 3 years and 6 months, and it did not rain on the earth. So a man was able to stop the rain. So a man is able to make it rain. Isn't that right? Then he prayed again, and heaven gave rain, and the earth bore its fruit. Brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back the sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sin. So, can you see here that you have authority, and if someone wanders, they can always be brought back. Do you understand that? Okay? If you have authority over the weather, you have authority, but if someone wanders, they can always be brought back. And if you bring someone back who has been wandering, then this is what will happen. He will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sin. Isn't that amazing? Okay, I'll jump up to verse 10. As an example of suffering and patience. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Okay? Now, the prophets, we should look at them as an example of what? Suffering and patience. Isn't that right? What did the prophets suffer? Persecution. What were they patient about? God's decision on what to do with those people who persecuted them. Isn't it right? Bearing with those people. Putting up with those people. The word patience means to put up with. So, as an example of suffering and patience, we ought to look at the prophets. Now, there is not one recorded prophet that God gave sickness to in order to teach them anything. Not one. I'm not saying there wasn't a prophet that got sick. I'm just saying there was no prophet God ever gave sickness to teach them anything. Does that make sense? So when he's talking about suffering here, he's not talking about sickness. You see that? Okay? So sickness is not necessarily included in suffering, even though it can be. But in this case, the example we have from the prophets does not include suffering sickness. Amen? Alright. Right, in verse 11. Behold, we consider those blessed who remained steadfast. What does it mean to remain steadfast? It means to stand your ground and to not be moved on what you've said and done. Isn't that right? So we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. We consider those blessed who did not give up. Amen? Alright. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job. Now, how many of you have been taught on Job and learned that Job was steadfast? Very few of you. So steadfastness isn't something that everyone gets out of Job, right? It's not something everyone learns when someone talks about Job. But clearly, James is saying that we should learn from Job that he was steadfast. Am I right? Okay, guys. James, who is he? Or Yaakov? He's Jesus' brother. Right? Am I right? He's an apostle. He was Jesus' brother and he was an apostle. Would he have misunderstood Job? So what he says is, you have heard, right? We consider those blessed who remain steadfast, and you have heard of the steadfastness of Job. Now the steadfastness of Job, wouldn't that be a theology or a doctrine that they would be teaching the church? If you've heard of the steadfastness of Job, there would be something that they taught about Job being steadfast. Am I right? Okay. And you have seen the purpose of the Lord. So you've learned about Job's steadfastness, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. Now, how many of you have learned Job and have thought God was very compassionate and merciful? Let's be honest. The way that Job has been presented, God is very far from compassionate and merciful. The way that it's been presented, isn't it right? Because God is the one unleashing all hell on Job, according to the modern day interpretation. But yeah, James is saying what we should learn from Job is that Job was steadfast and that God was full of mercy and compassion. Oh my goodness. Somewhere along the line, someone got something wrong. Because how can a first century Jew who walked with Jesus understand it this way, and yet we understand it completely differently? You see why I say we should take the New Testament and look at the New Testament so we can understand the Old Testament? Do you know, we don't even know when the book of Job was written? In what era, in what time? Do you know that? Probably even before Abraham. We don't know really. So I want to show you some things about the book of Job that you might not have seen before. But I first want to show you that I'm going to look at this and I'm going to let this govern what I see. Is that okay? Would that be accurate? Do you think we would do the Bible justice by agreeing with what James says? Are you okay with that? Alright, let's go to the book of Job. Now, normally, like most things, it's kind of the beginning that people get wrong. Like, it's when you start off. How many of you know if we launched a spaceship from the Earth to the moon, if we don't calculate the speed at which the moon is traveling, the speed at which the rocket's going, the different things, we will miss the moon. Yeah. So if you start from the wrong place, you will end up in the wrong place. Right? It's like playing pool or snooker. Alright? If you hit the ball wrong, it's going to end up in the wrong place. If you hit the ball right, it'll end up in the right place. So the start is very important. So we need to understand the beginning of this very well. Now, what I can tell you is that by the time Job comes onto the scene, Adam and Eve have already fallen. Amen. All agree with me there. So we've already gone through a time. Now I don't know whether it probably is after Noah, because I don't know whether how many books would survive after Noah and all the water and all that stuff. But so I would imagine it's after Noah, okay? But let's say at that time already there has been some things happening on the earth. Now, remember the Tower of Babel. You remember the Tower of Babel? People were united to build a tower that reached into heaven, and God said, let us go and confuse them, because if they unite against us, there will be no stopping them, and then they will basically seal their fate. So God, out of His mercy, decided to confuse us so that we wouldn't end up damning ourselves permanently. Does it make sense? So He confuses people and they all head in their own directions, which should make people believe that if you do something evil, God's going to stop you. Wouldn't it? That would be the experience. And it would make you believe that if you do what's right, then God's going to bless you. Yes? So in Job's day, you'll see this mentality that is there. That God is the one who will give, and God is the one who will take away. Okay? Because they have this idea, their philosophy of the day is you came into the world naked, and naked you leave the world. So you can't take anything with you. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a lie. It's true. But the reality is God's not in the business of taking away. Okay? The devil does enough of that. God doesn't have to try. All you need to do is, if you're in relationship with God and God is protecting you, all you need to do is step out of that protection. And the devil wants you, man. So if you're in here in relationship with God and you step out, boom. You see, this is the hedge of protection. But you can do something to destroy the hedge. You can do something to stop that hedge from working. Now, for you and I, the Bible says in Psalm 91, right? It's Psalm 91 where God talks about the protection and all that. So in Psalm 91, it starts off and it says that those who abide in the shadow of the Most High, right? Who the Lord is their tower and their refuge, right? It's talking about Him being the hedge. And it says those who abide in Him are in that tower, and we're protected. And then it lists a whole bunch of stuff about that protection that we have in Him, right? So the key is not to get out of Him. Now, what keeps you in Him is trusting Him. The minute you move your trust, the minute your trust is shifted from trusting God alone to trusting something else, what do? You move out of that protection. Let's read Job. Verse 1, chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Oz. Not Oz like in Dorothy, but Oz as in U-Z, right? Whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and turned away from evil. So he was someone who didn't want to do what was wrong. Someone who wanted to do what was right. Yes? There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. That totals how many children? 10, right? 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. So that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. So he was the greatest of all the people in the East. He was the Donald Trump of the East. His sons, now let's just stop there. Why is the Bible telling us about all these things that he has? I mean, how many other people does it introduce to us with all the stuff that the person has. You don't see that often, do you? So why is Job's introduction so much about all that he has? Because what he has becomes important. Right? Because it's relevant to the story. So just remember that, because what he has is important, and you'll see what happens. Verse 4. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Now, if there were 7 sons, and there were 7 days, it's possible that they could have had a party every day. Right? But some people say to me, this is their birthday, so fine, their birthday. Point is, they did this often. Okay? So they would do this often. They would often go and make these parties. Okay? And when the days of feasts had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them. So Job would send for them and consecrate them, right? And he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. How many offerings is that? The 10 burnt offerings. For Job said, it may be, now watch this is Job speaking. Right? For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. Right. So let's just back up from the story and look at it a little bit nicely, okay? So we have Job with all this stuff, right? He's got a whole bunch of stuff. And his children, they start to party regularly, okay? And all of a sudden, Job, after they've had their party, he sends for them, he brings them to a place, and then he rises early in the morning, and he makes sacrifices for them all, because it might be, not it is, it might be that they have cursed God in their hearts. Okay, why would Job do this? Because he was afraid. You can see that that's the actions of a scared man. Isn't that right? That's the actions of a scared man. Why would someone do that? They're anticipating something that isn't even there yet. Now hold on. Did God show up in a dream to Job and say, Job, your children might offend me. So as to protect you, you should make 10 offerings after their festivities. Did he say that? So Job is acting here out of his own volition. He's acting out of his own fear. God never told him to make these sacrifices. And he's making these sacrifices. Now, what does Job have lots of? Would his cattle and his riches not be the same? So what Job is trying to do is, he's trying to buy protection. Isn't it? He's trying to earn protection from God because he's afraid that his children are going to mess up the protection he has. Now, what gave him that protection in the first place? Was it because he earned it? Did he buy his way into protection with God? Is that how he got protected? Or was it because he believed God was good and trusted God? So it wasn't his sacrifices that got him protection in the first place. It was his relationship that got him protection in the first place. So here he is, right? He's protected because he has relationship. But then, out of fear, he decides to do something to earn what he already has. And when you do something to earn what you already have, you admit that you don't really believe that you have it. Ooh. If I believe that you're a good person, then I'm not going to make contingency plans for in case you be bad to me. If I make contingency plans, I don't really trust you. If I say I trust you, but I don't actually trust you, it'll be evident in your actions and how you do things. Isn't that right? So now, where did this start? Where did Job get this idea from that his children might curse God? Now, first of all, Job believes that God gave him everything he has. Isn't that right? And he's of the mindset that God can give him everything and God can take it all away. He believes this. This is a mindset that he has. So all that would need to happen is someone would need to come and tell him, hey Job, what if your children sin and God takes everything away from you? And as you can see, he's got quite a bit to lose. Isn't that right? So Job is thinking, oh, we can't have that. If God's going to punish me, I'm going to beat him to the chase. I'm going to make sacrifice before he even gets angry. Which means that Job is now beginning to believe that God is not trustworthy, that he has to somehow pay for God to be who God is. Understand? This is what fear will do to you. Fear will make you act in such a way that it sets you in a position away from the protection of God. Do you understand? It takes you out of abiding in Him. Perfect love casts out all fear. Fear is not part of you, believer. Fear is not meant to be part of you. Jesus said, do not be anxious for anything. That was a commandment, not a suggestion. Amen? Right. Now watch this. It says, for Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. So Job's doing this how many times?
All the time.
All the time. You see, people are really good at speaking their fears. Verse 6. Now we go into a different scene. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Now, this term sons of God is more accurately the angels. Okay? Just so you know. Because there were no other sons of God. It was just that they were heavenly beings. So these are the angels. And Satan also came among them. Now, how many of you believe the devil was chucked out of heaven? Who more the third? How does he get back in there? If he's been chucked out of heaven, what audacity does he have coming even into the presence of God? How does he get there? Because he has usurped the dominion of man. And he is standing in man's rightful place. Because man has chosen to bow its knee to him. Do you understand? That's why he's able to go in there at that time. And the Bible says his name is Satan. Why? Because he is the accuser. The word Satan means accuser. And the Bible says that iniquity was found in him because of his much trading up and down the mountain. The word trading there isn't for buying and selling. It's for telling tales. Iniquity was found in him because of all the stories that he was bringing about others. He was a tatty-tale. How many of you like tatty-tales? Intrinsically, we don't like them. Why? Because we know it's just like the devil to do that. Why do you think slander is so bad? Why do you think it's grouped with sexual immorality and murderers? Why is it there? Lying, slander, sexual immorality, murderers. Why are they all grouped together? Because it's all part of the nature of the devil. Do you see that? The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Now I want you to understand, there are two places where this dialogue happens, and the dialogue is exactly the same. Which means that this is a standard dialogue that God had with the devil. Are you with me? It wasn't a unique dialogue. It's a standard dialogue. The devil doesn't want to give too much away, and God already knows more than the devil thinks he knows. Does it make sense? So when God's asking this question, He's asking it to get the devil to tell him what's going on, even though he already knows. Does that make sense? Okay. Where have you come? From where have you come? God asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." Now that's like when you ask your child, "What are you doing?" Nothing. Right, have you heard your child say that? What do you know? It's definitely not nothing. Is that right? And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" So now people think that God is bringing Job into the spotlight. But God is just shifting the direction of the conversation to Job because He knows the devil's up to something. He knows that the devil's been considering Job. Okay? Watch, you'll see. "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" And then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason?" So does he know about Job? How can the devil say that if he didn't know about Job? "Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side?" How would he know that? How would the devil know that there is a hedge around Job on every side? Because he tried to get in. That's right, and he couldn't get in. You see that? He tried to get in and he couldn't get in. So there was a hedge of protection around Job. Isn't that right? And it was working. And the devil couldn't get in. But then Job, he changes something. Right? Now, when the devil can't get in, what does he do? He tries to create doubts. So you can imagine him coming to Job and going, "You know, God gave you everything you have. But your children, if they curse God, God will take everything away from you. You better make sure that doesn't happen." Oh. Let me tell you how it would sound. It would sound like this. "My children are always partying and they might curse God one day, and if they do, then I'm going to lose everything because God will punish them. I better do something about it." That's how it would sound in your head. And then you'll go, "Yo, that sounds wise." And why are you agreeing with yourself? This wasn't you. And so now you start making a contingency plan, and in making a contingency plan, all you're doing is exposing that you don't trust God anymore. That you put your trust in your contingency plan. You shifted your faith from trusting God to trusting in something else. God says this very important thing next. Okay, let me just finish what the devil says. He says, "You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. Now, are you looking in your Bible? Are you looking in your Bible? Okay? Now watch what it says. And the Lord said, I will strike Job and prove you wrong. Oh, you mean your Bible doesn't say that? But that's what you believe. It says. It doesn't say that. Look what it does say. And the Lord said to Satan, behold. The word behold means pay attention. If I come into the room and I say, behold, then it's, look here. Can you see? Does it make sense? Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Did he say, I'm putting all that he has in your hand? Or did he say, look, it's like a startup. Everything he has is already in your hand. Why? Because Job had already broken the hedge. He'd already moved out of God's protection. But the devil was so slow, he still didn't even know it. That's why disaster doesn't always fall on the wicked immediately. Because the devil isn't omnipresent. And he has limited resources. And he can't be everywhere at once. He's not God. But one day when you see him, you're going to say, is that him? Is that the one who did all these things? Are you joking? The Bible says, you, believer, you will judge angels. That's all that he is. And you will judge him. You know what I'm doing right now? I am destroying your fear of the devil. He has only got as much power as you've given him. Jesus defeated him. That means he has no more feet left. He disarmed him. It means he has got no more arms either. The Bible says Jesus spoiled principalities and powers and made an open mockery of him. An open mockery of him. And then we want to go around acting like he's still something. This is not his planet. It's yours. Own it. He doesn't belong here. He has no legal right here. You are the legal custodians of this planet according to God. He gave you the right to rule and reign here. You and not the devil. Amen? At this day, people didn't know what I just told you. They didn't even know there was a devil. Does that make sense? Okay. So God says, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now watch this. Do you know that the devil had every right at that point in time to kill Job? Yes, Job? He has come out of God's protection. He is completely vulnerable. Right now, the devil can take Job out, can kill him. Why? Because the devil has got authority at that point in time to kill him. Because he's got dominion on the earth that man gave him. You see that? It's got nothing to do with God saying, go and get him. Watch what God does say. God says, look, he's not under my protection anymore, but you won't touch him. That's called mercy. That's withholding something from someone that they do deserve. That's called compassion. Doing something about something so that the outcome isn't what it is. God is being merciful and very compassionate. Because even though Job deserves to die, because he has stepped out of God's protection, God is still protecting him. Now God cannot justly protect all of them because why? Job keeps believing that this is going to come upon him. Do you know in chapter 3, he says it. In verse 35, I think. He says, the very thing that I feared has come upon me. Fear is as powerful as faith. But it is trust in all sorts of bad, evil things happening to you, instead of trust in God that everything's going to be okay. Do you see the difference? Now, in spite of Job making this mistake, he still holds fast to his integrity. He still does not budge from the idea that, okay, even if God is doing this to me, God is still good. And this is the steadfastness of Job. You understand? Because even though Job doesn't understand what's going on, even though Job he's not sure what's happening, why this is happening, he will not curse God and he will not say God is evil. Does that make sense? But his friends, his wonderful friends, they come and they tell him, Job, you must have done something for God to do this to you. Isn't that right? There is some kind of evil that you must have done because God will always be just. He will not just punish you for no reason. You must have done something for God to punish you like this. With friends like that, you don't need enemies, people. Unfortunately, this has even happened in Christianity. That's complete blasphemy. We're in a whole different covenant. We're in a different relationship with God. If God was visiting the sins, your sins against you, you wouldn't be here right now, man. You'd be 10 foot under. If God was angry, if He wasn't slow to anger, full of mercy, and if His mercies were not new every morning, you would be in trouble, man. Every morning, mercy wakes me up and tells me there's another day to be like Jesus. Because His mercies are new every day. And my God is not in the business of counting sins against me that His Son paid for. And that empowers me to not sin. It doesn't empower me to go and sin and claim I'm on my way to heaven. Does it make sense? The Bible says, you have been made free. Only do not use your freedom for an excuse to sin. The grace of God upon your life is not an excuse to act like a devil claiming to be on your way to heaven. The grace of God upon your life is to empower you to be everything God created you to be, which is just like Him, holy, righteous, and complete. Amen. So what they could not do, because they were only in the flesh, now that you have the Spirit, you can do by accident more than they ever could do on purpose under the old. Because you're empowered by Him. You have His Spirit with you. Does that make sense? But I'm just so excited about the gospel. That's why I always jump there, okay? I just can't help it. It's too awesome. Okay, so you can see here that clearly God did not tell the devil to go and get Job, right? Are you clear on that? Alright. But then He did show the devil that Job was not protected anymore. And then He told the devil not to touch Job. Now, if the devil had found Job unprotected, do you think God would have had the opportunity to stop him from killing Job? No. If the devil had found him unprotected, he would have killed him immediately. But because God brought it up, God was able to actually spare Job's life. Do you see that? So what we have thought for so many years was God setting Job up for this huge trial and test. Was actually God making sure that Job doesn't die. Now wouldn't you say that's merciful and compassionate? But the story goes on. Many people like to remind me about that. Especially when I'm talking like this. Because a lot of people want to hold to this idea that God is in it. He's got it in for them. He's going to show up at any moment, and all kinds of disasters are going to come their way. I'm going to show you, as the sessions go on, that this is not what God's plan is for you. God has got a very clear way how He instructs us, how He rebukes us, how He encourages us, and He doesn't need to use evil to do it. Watch this. If this is God, right, and His hands are open, right, and you are here with Him, is everything good? Alright, now over there, that side is the devil. So this is life and life abundantly. The more you walk away from God, the more you're walking towards what? Steal, kill, destroy. Right? So people turn their back on God, they hit success, they turn their back on God, and they walk towards steal, kill, and destroy. Then they start suffering the consequences of their sin, steal, kill, and destroy. The enemy begins to attack them, and then they go, oh, God hates me because I am sinning and walking away from Him. And then they decide God's trying to teach me to come back to Him. This is God doing this to me. Meanwhile, they're doing it to themselves.
Yes.
Because they're running into the arms of the devil rather than running into the arms of their Father. And then at some point when they get here, when things are rock bottom, when the devil has stolen everything from them, then they suddenly and finally come to this realization that maybe this pigsty they're living in is not so great. Maybe my Father's house, even as a servant, it'll be okay. And then they turn back to God and they go, I'm coming home. And the Father runs towards them. Because all He needed to know was you're coming home. And He hadn't done any of that stuff to you. You did it to yourself by running into the hands of the devil. Don't run towards the one who wants to kill you. Run towards the one who wants to save you. Put your trust in Him. These man-made gimmicks and schemes, these philosophies of men, these empires of so-called protection, they mean nothing. They will fall apart tomorrow. They are all on a thin edge. Every cover you think you have will fall away in a second. And when you need it most, they'll say, we can't help you. You want to save money for a rainy day. You know what God said to the man who had a big harvest, and he stored everything up in his granary so that he could fold his hands. And he said to himself, I'll eat and be merry and never have to work another day. And God said, you fool, I will have your life tomorrow, and then will all your grain be worth. Now this is actually a Bible story, people. If you put your trust in anything but God, you are making yourself vulnerable. You are opening yourself up for the enemy to come and steal and kill and destroy. And for heaven's sake, don't blame my Father when it happens. He is not the one hurting you. He is your answer. He is your solution. He is the help you need. He is not your enemy. You have an enemy, and he is an accuser, and he has accused you from the beginning. And when he couldn't accuse you before the Father, he accused you in the courtroom of your own conscience. It's so very, very important, guys, that you get this. We need to consecrate our lives to God. Spirit, soul, and body. You must
must go to God for your spiritual needs as you have. And you must go to God for your physical needs as you have. And you must go to God for your psychological needs. There is not one compartment of your life where God is not sufficient for your life. He is sufficient for all. Amen? Job's mistake here was that he ended up trusting something other than God. And he was driven by fear. Don't let fear drive you, amen? You don't have to let that happen. Alright, so check what happens here in verse 13. Now, there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck them down, the servants with the edge of a sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Now let me ask you, if a group of random people showed up at your house and slaughtered your family, or slaughtered all your cattle, would you blame God? Because those people have a choice to do what they're doing, isn't it? So they were influenced by something, but they still chose to do it. Correct? So this wasn't God doing it, was it? You see that? They were influenced by the devil to do this. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven. Now in their days, they saw lightning as the fire of God. How many of you know lightning is not the fire of God? Yes. So they had misconceptions about certain things, right? So the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep, and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels, and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness, and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So the wind caused the house to have the roof fall on these kids, and that's how they died. Now, if someone has dominion over the earth, do you think that they might have dominion over the wind, over lightning, and over people who have carnal ways of living? Okay, so you can see that the devil was the one instigating these attacks against Job, right? Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. You see the mindset? That way of thinking, the philosophy? Okay? The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now notice it says, in all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So he wasn't saying this to accuse God. He was saying this because that's what he believed. Okay? I came into this world naked. I'll leave this world naked. God can give me what he wants, and he can take everything away. You understand the idea, the philosophy behind that? That doesn't mean that's how God is. Yes? He didn't charge God with wrong. He didn't charge God with evil. He was just making a statement based on what he believed. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, we're going to go back to another day. Same period of time, but there's another day in heaven. And again, there was a day where the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, going to and fro on the earth. So once again, the same dialogue is happening here. It's almost like the same thing. And from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? So he's asking the same question again. So if God was pointing out Job the first time, what's he doing now? Do you see that? He was definitely not pointing out Job. He was trying to bring Job to the forefront of the discussion so that God could know what the devil was up to about it. Right? Do you see that? Okay. There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Now, if God would attack someone without reason, would that be sin? Is God saying, you enticed me or you incited me to act against Job without reason? Let's read it again. He says here, he holds to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. The word incite there means to tempt. Okay? Now what do we know about God? God cannot be tempted. Right? So if the devil tried to tempt God, you think God would be tempted to do what the devil told him to do? That would be him sinning, wouldn't it? So clearly God is not saying, I attacked Job. He's saying, even though Job thinks that I attacked him, look, you were wrong anyway. Do you see that? Why? Because Job still holds to his integrity. Because God is boasting about Job. He's saying, Job is a man of integrity. He's righteous. He shuns evil. He clings to what is good. God is pleased with Job. Are you with me? Okay? But God cannot go against the fact that he has given dominion to man and that man has given dominion to the devil. So God can't do anything about what the devil is doing. Because man has given the devil the right to attack him. And the only way Job can escape that attack is if he chooses to put his trust in God and then God can protect him. Do you see that? So that's why our dominion is in Christ, right? So when we're in Jesus, we have the dominion Jesus has on the earth. Because Jesus is the one to whom the dominion has been restored. And in him, we have that dominion. Does that make sense? Alright. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, all that a man has, he will give for his life. So you can see the devil is saying, yo, whatever, God. This guy will give everything just so he can hang on to his life. The fact that he's still got his life, that's why he still holds to his integrity. Okay? Now, we know that the only reason Job is still alive is because God is showing him mercy. Which means the devil actually has a right to demand his life. Is that right? Then he says, but stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand. So he's saying, okay, look, he's already in your hand. Only spare his life. See, now God is still trying to save Job's life. You see that? So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome swords from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. So who does the sickness thing? Was that the devil? So the devil's the one who does the sickness thing. And when you come out of the protection of the Lord, or you don't have God's protection because you're not trusting him, the devil will take advantage of that and he will strike you. You see that? So the work of the devil is sickness and disease. He would prefer to just kill you. What? He would prefer to just kill you, but he has to get you there through sickness and disease. Does it make sense? Alright. Then we go to Job 3. Let's read from verse 25. This is Job speaking. And he says, for the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. This is Job's admittance that he was in fear. Now, if you read the rest of Job, you'll find it very depressing. There's a lot of good things in there. But we're going to jump to the end of Job so we can see what actually happens at the end. Alright? If Job's friends were right, then God would agree with it. Right? If Job's friends were right, God would agree with it. Am I correct? Right throughout the story of Job, Job never says God is evil or bad.
Am I right? Why? Because he doesn't understand what's happening, but he's not going to speak against God. Right? I mean, his own wife comes up to him and says, curse God and die. Isn't that perhaps the devil working through her to get him to do that so that God could not spare him? See that? Sometimes the advice you get from people closest to you are meant for your destruction. So make sure they're speaking according to the Word of God and not according to the carnal mind of man. Amen? So watch this. This is what happens in chapter 42, verse 1. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, Job is saying, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear and I will speak. I will question you and you will make known to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself, and I repent in dust and ashes. So has Job repented? Well, what would he need to repent from? He didn't curse God. He repented from not trusting God. You see that? He repented from not trusting God. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz and the Temanite, my anger burns against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right. So God was upset with them for saying what they said to Job. Isn't it? As my servant Job has. Now therefore, take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves, and my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer, not to deal with you according to your folly. Isn't that interesting? For you have not spoken of me what is right. So they said God was doing this to Job, right? And when God saying that that's not what happened, am I right, guys? So they said to Job, you must have done something for God to do this against you. God is doing this to you. And God is saying, you have not spoken about me what is right. I did not do this. Correct? So they were wrong, even though they thought they were right. Okay? And the mindset of these people were of such a nature that they thought that God was doing this to people. Are you with me? Okay. So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamite went and did what the Lord had told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Now watch this. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job. And now you're going to see in this passage how strong this prevailing mindset actually was. Because where was all Job's family when this was happening to him? Did anyone come and help him, or did they all desert him? He was on his own, wasn't he? Now, this happens to him and they suddenly all show up. Yeah? So watch what happens. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. And then came to him all his brothers and sisters and all that had known him before, and ate bread with him in his house. And they showed him sympathy and comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. What a confused bunch of people. If you look at verse 1, the word says, or disaster. If you look at that point that they've got there, or disaster, or the disaster that the Lord had brought upon him. And you can see that that was the mindset of the people. Because we can see clearly that God was angry with Job's friends for saying that God had done this to him. This is not God doing this to Job. This is the devil who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He's always been this way. He will always be that way. And he will never change. If there was any hope for him, God would have known. God knows that there is no hope for him. He's a cut-off branch. He's withering. He's alone. He is everything that he manifests in people that go after him. Depressed, lonely, angry, afraid, cut off, withering, lacking, not complete. Are you with me? So, in conclusion, what I'd like to say is, even if everything that people teach us about Job was true, we're still not Job's disciples, and we're not meant to follow Job. I still can't claim a Job experience because I'm not living in Job's day under his covenant. I'm living under the new covenant in relationship with Jesus. Okay? Secondly, James tells us that yes, we can learn something from Job. We can learn that Job was steadfast, so that even when he didn't understand what he was seeing, and it would be understandable because the early church, many times, people were being murdered in front of them and bad things were happening. Even though they didn't understand why these things were happening, he was encouraging them to continue to believe that God was good in spite of the situations that they were facing, which were clearly orchestrated by the devil. And that God is merciful and compassionate. And really, it would make sense that James would use that within the context of what was happening in the early church to explain how that we should endure and stand fast in spite of the things that are happening to people around us and even to ourselves. Does that make sense? So James said that this is what we learn from Job, that God is merciful and full of compassion, but that Job did not lose his integrity, that he stood fast, and we consider it an honorable thing to stand fast. Amen? This is what you should learn from the book of Job in the New Testament. And nothing else. You're not meant to identify with Job's experience or anything like that. Should I ask for protection every day? Okay, so like Job was making sacrifices every time after his children had made these parties because he was afraid that they would become vulnerable and then they would make him vulnerable, right? So he made these sacrifices almost as an insurance policy against God sending calamity his way. Correct? So if you wake up every morning and you ask God for protection, okay, if you are motivated by the fear that if you don't ask God for protection that you will not be protected, then it's out of fear that you're asking, not out of faith. But if you are motivated, for me, I don't ask God for protection, I thank Him for it. So I wake up in the morning and I say, Father, I thank you, I am protected, I abide in you. I don't need to ask. Now I'll ask for a heathen. I'll ask for someone who's unsaved because they don't know God, they're not in relationship. And I can put a hedge of protection around them by asking for protection for them. Right? But for me, because I believe the Word and I'm in Christ and I'm in that tower, I expect that protection and I thank God for it. Okay? Does that make sense? Because what I noticed was that if you don't ask for it and then something bad happens, you go, oh, I never prayed and asked God for protection, that's why this happened. It's the devil's trying to trick you, he's trying to get you. Job didn't have protection because he asked for it every day. Job had protection because he was in relationship with God and he trusted Him. It was only when he shifted out of that trust, that was when he became vulnerable. Amen? So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with asking for protection, but I would encourage you to make sure that your motivation isn't fear-based. You're not doing it because you're afraid of something bad happening to you. We should do it because we know God is for us. So it would be something like, Father, I just want to ask your protection in this area, let's say, and I thank you that I have it. Much of what we ask for in Christianity is actually things God has already given us, and it's an acknowledgement of what we have that makes our faith effective. Okay? So if we spend our time asking for things for others, because we know we're already taken care of, and that proves that we begin to understand what God has actually given us. Yeah? Okay, also, have you guys learned something today? Alright.